which is one of my favorite topics. I have a Pinterest out here, edgeloops, that I just like to go and look at pretty models and click on them, and they make me very happy. It's literally my bedtime story. I like to look at good edgeloops. So a good collection out here, and now I'm working on kind of a collection of what are my favorite hands and what are my favorite knees, et cetera, et cetera. And if we take a look at edgeloops in action, we usually think about edgeloops for characters, right? And here's a couple of the rules I have for why we would use them. A lot of this comes from Eric Allen's book, who's also a professor here at SCAD with me. And one of them is that edgeloops help you add detail for wrinkles and defining muscle scars, et cetera. And this is a gorgeous example I found out there on probably ArtStation. And we think about characters because it gives us maximum deformation for the animation. A really good edgeloops helps us do great key poses, right? And so there's all those things, but what we often neglect is to think about, well, actually we need great edgeloops in props as well. And I see that as a missed understanding. So let's take a look. Why will we need it in props if they're not moving? Okay, let's take a look. And the answer is, it comes down to the lighting. So here's an example of a very boring prop. It looks like I don't know what, a French fry. All the same, but here we have basically no edgeloops, and I see props come in often like this, or where we really need to have some more edgeloops in them. And if I do a render, we'll start to see why. All these props are the same, but look how they render differently given the edgeloops. Get to where we can see everything here. There we go. All right, so this one back here, which has long planes, right? These long polygons, and we remember our rules of modeling: long, thin polygons and big, huge quads is a no-no. And this is why, because it lights differently. So if I have something that's like a sign, and I'll show you an example here in a second, that has these long quads, it ends up doing okay, but you might actually get some darkness in here. This one's not too bad. Depending on your render, you might see some darkness when it turns this 90-degree angle. Here I'm seeing some weird stuff along this edge because it has some quads here, but not necessarily on the top. Versus this one is actually getting lit both on top and bottom, and that's because it actually has some quads in there. And so that's what we're looking for, and why we asked for that. Okay, so if I take a look at some examples, let's see. Oh, always. It's others. You know, I had it right there and I must have closed it. Always, always, always. All right, give me 1 second to go find it. All right, so if I look at these and take a look from a student film, we're going to have some issues with these because ultimately that's a long, thin quad, or actually a huge quad, all of these. So they're going to light oddly, especially if they're sitting next to something that's getting more light because it has more information. Everything here needs to be split so that we have more polygon information to capture that light. And then even though these are all quads, they all come to this one vertex here in the center. So that one vertex is going to capture the light for all these spaces. It might create a rendering issue. You might see a shadow across there. So that's one example, and that's why we want to do it. So I want to introduce you to my favorite tool, favorite tools rather, that Maya has hidden. Let me find. It's called Remesh, polyRemesh, and polyRetopo. So even if you have an object that had originally long, thin quads, you can retopo it so it's fairly even. This could use a little more work, but it's not too bad. And here are the stages for it. Okay, so first off, polyRemesh and polyRetopo are not a button inside Maya. They came out about 2019. They're hidden inside Maya. On a PC, you'll have access to both. For a Macintosh, I believe you only get polyRemesh. Sorry. All right. And I like Macintosh, but I don't like Macintosh for Maya. So we cover this in my props class, when we model, I have never in my life said, yes, Booleans are a great thing. Booleans meaning that I take an object, I shove it into another object cruelly, and then I use this Boolean tool. Go to modeling. Never have I used these. I mean, I have, but only to laugh at them. And if I do difference, it depends on how I selected it. So if I select driver driven difference, there we go. It subtracts one from the other. But the problem with Booleans and why I've laughed at it for 25 years is because it creates just horrible geometry. Who wants that? That's nasty. Right? And then you end up having to remake it and retopo it, and you spend a lot of time. Well, you could have just animated it or modeled it yourself without all that business. But now we've got this concept of the polyRemesh. So the polyRemesh lets us go in and take this object and make it look like this. Yes, it's triangles, but you didn't create these triangles. Maya did, so it's a little bit better. So let me show you. So it's not going to be a button. You have to actually type it in. So I've got the words here. Let me make it bigger so that we can see them. So the first one is polyRemesh. So I'm going to select it. You can type it down here and hit in this meld command down here and hit enter. And that's going to give me all those triangles in there. And then we can adjust it. Let me close this. I don't like this window myself. Let me open the channels box, theoretically. Can't see it for the recording window. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so I've got it selected. Here's my polyRemesh there. And you can adjust these, right? So max edge length, right? Make it super big, and then you'll have to wait for your computer to think for a little bit, so don't do that. And you can adjust how much noodling it does in there, and it'll take a sec. So perhaps not the middle mouse slider on this one. Maybe just type in the number by increments and hit enter. Otherwise, you're going to sit here and worry what went wrong. There we go. So if I do 3, for instance, not so much, 0.5, looks pretty good. So polyRemesh, just from the get-go, perfect, right? And if that's all you got, if you got a Mac, then you can go and do, oh, where's quadrillate from here? There it is, quadrangulate. You could quad that yourself or let Maya quad it, and it does an interesting job. I have to go back and look at the settings. But ultimately, we want to get it to quads, whether you can use the next one or not. All right, so now we've got something. It's got some geometry in it. I could sit here and adjust the smooth strength on it to get that top bit to be a little bit better, and collapse threshold. I don't think it's going to give me a whole lot on this one. So from here, then, we can do the next thing if you're on a PC, which is going to be polyRetopo. Okay, so polyRetopo gets us from this stage to here, right? So if I take a look at this one, I'll use this one. Now, personally, I like to do edit, delete by type history in between. Okay, that's the one I did have. Here's the one I just made because I don't want to pre-bake these on you. I'm going to do them in front of you. All right, so I'm going to get from here to here or something like it using the polyRetopo. So this command now, I'll put down here and hit enter. And it looks too smooth to begin with. It's doing its best. So that comes down here to this target face count. So if I bring this up to even like 500, there we go. 1,000, I can start to get a little bit more of that, right? If you're really offended by what it's doing here on the top, that's fine. You can go in and redraw those. You can retopo those if you want. Use quad draw, for example, and I'll have another tutorial on that later on. But you can see all of a sudden now I've got something that's way more useful than what we started out with. Oh, I deleted already, didn't I? All right, well, we started out with this one. Right, so from here to here. So even just that polyRetopo can help you out in taking a polygon that maybe you've done some type of Boolean on or you've created and then trying to get some nice quads on it. I'd like this to be a little more even personally, but I can go in there and adjust that and smooth it out. At least I know it's going to catch the light. All right then, plenty of tutorials out there on that, on polyRetopo. Besides mine, there's a really good one out there, and I'll put that in the chat room or in the links. Cool, there you go.